Hello, everyone. It's Phil Lee returning with another episode of Civil War Chat. Today is the 20th of October, 2022. Click on the subscribe button here in the lower right to subscribe to future episodes, and also the notification bell in the far upper right to be notified when they're released. And also, if you click on that bell, you're going to get the most appreciative Halloween trick-or-treaters calling on you and anybody in your neighborhood. So let me go ahead and get started with my presentation here and pull up my notes. The presentation is Postbellum Discriminatory Taxation. For over a century after the war between the states, the South was the country's most impoverished region. As late as 1900, 35 years after the war ended, the South's per capita income was only half of the national average. By deduction, that means that America's other geographic regions outside the South had more than twice the South's per capita income. Even as late as the 1930s, the South's per capita income was only 55% of the national average, also suggesting that other regions collectively, again, had more than twice the per capita income of the South. At least one of the major causes of the protracted poverty was a pattern of federal taxation that discriminated against the South for many decades. Consider, for example, that tariffs on dutiable items averaged only 19% on the eve of the Civil War, but averaged 45% for 50 years thereafter, until Southern Democrat Woodrow Wilson became president in 1913. He was able to get them reduced for his two terms, but after the Republicans regained control of the federal government during the roaring 1920s, the tariffs went right back up. Such protective duties were particularly injurious to the South for two reasons. Firstly, they increased the price that all Americans had to pay for tariff-protected items. Secondly, and more importantly, they reduced the prices that overseas buyers would pay for Southern exports, especially cotton and tobacco. And during much of this period, the South was the major export region of the entire country. Now, the prices got reduced because of the reduced exchange credits that our trading partners could earn with which to pay for our exports. During the mercantile system that obtained until after World War II, countries basically paid for imports with funds they received by selling exports. Any deficit was made up by gold, and if you had a positive gold production, that helped, but it generally did not offset everything. As South Carolinian John C. Calhoun put it back in the 1830s, we Southerners export to import, close quote. Now, Calhoun's point is best explained by a simplified example. Assume that Britain sends $300 million in manufactured goods to America in one massive fleet. If there is no tariff, the shipper, meaning Great Britain, collects $300 million in proceeds by selling their goods to Americans. He thereby, meaning Great Britain, has $300 million in U.S. currency with which to buy American exports, to load into the hulls of his empty ships, typically sitting at an American harbor, typically New York. Now, consider the same scenario when a 45% import tariff is imposed upon British goods. Instead of collecting $300 million, the shipper must pay $135 million of the sales proceeds to our federal government as an import tax. Thereafter, the shipper has only $165 million in American currency with which to buy USA exports. To buy the same quantity of American exports as in the tariff-free example, the shipper must reduce their bid price to American sellers by 45%. Since the Southern farmers were consistently such sellers well into the 20th century, they were forced to accept prices that were far below what a tariff-free market would have provided for them. In short, Southerners not only had to pay the same inflated prices for Northern-made manufactured goods, protected from overseas competition by deterrence tariffs, as did all Americans, but they also had to accept steeply lower prices for their export products like cotton and tobacco. Now, typically, today's academic historians justify the discriminatory postbellum pricing by arguing that high tariffs were necessary to pay off the federal debt accumulated during the war. Further investigation reveals that assertion to be a lie. While it is true that antebellum tariffs accounted for about 90% of federal tax revenue during the antebellum period, during the war itself, the federal government found it necessary to impose unprecedented, quote, internal taxes as well, thereby spawning today's dreaded Internal Revenue Service. Anyway, the internal taxes included examples like those on income and the excise fees on distilled spirits, tobacco, and other items produced domestically. By the end of the war between the states, tariffs accounted for only 50% of federal revenues. Thus, after Appomattox, the Republican-controlled Congress could have reduced tariffs and, quote, internal taxes proportionally in lockstep. Instead, they left the tariffs high and reduced the internal taxes, even though the wartime moral tariffs were supposed to be explicitly temporary. In fact, in 1866, a year after the war ended, Congress created a special commission to manage the transition to lower tariffs. David Wells, the chairman of an earlier revenue commission, was appointed to a 4-year term to lead the new one. Despite supporting deterrence tariffs during the war, Wells was appalled at the postbellum selfishness of many domestic manufacturers demanding and getting such tariffs. Regarding such deterrence tariffs, he wrote, quote, "The matter is more of prejudice and of opinion founded upon self-interest than almost any other policy facing the government," close quote. Later, he added, quote, "A duty originally levied for revenue and protection has been continued long after its objective has been fully attained for the interest of a few, but to the detriment of many," close quote. He particularly objected to the high duties on pig iron that simply padded the profits of domestic producers, and particularly in Pennsylvania. When the Birmingham, Alabama mills became ascendant toward the end of the 19th century, Northern-based U.S. Steel simply acquired them. And then once they acquired them, they raised their prices. In point of fact, when they acquired the Birmingham mills, they first put a surcharge. If you were buying from Birmingham, after U.S. Steel bought them, automatically you got a surcharge right after they bought them. I think it was originally at $3 a ton, and then it went to $5 a ton. And also, if you purchased the steel from Birmingham, you would pay the freight from Birmingham to your destination, but also you would pay a phantom freight as if the shipment originated in Pittsburgh. To learn more about all of this, I recommend that you get my book, Southern Reconstruction by Philip Lee. It's $26 at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. If you want an autographed copy, you can get it from me. For $30, just email me, Phil, PHIL _Lee, LEIGH at me.com. We are in the 150th, centennial era of Reconstruction. So it would be a good idea to get well informed on this, because you're going to see more and more academic historians coming out with all these nasty tales about how bad Southerners were during Reconstruction. This book tells you the two sides to the story, both those of the Southerners and the Northern, and of course the Blacks. So that's our show for today, and I want to thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you next time.